The weaponization of government, the topic back in focus on Capitol Hill. Since taking up the issue back in February, big tech has been in the crosshairs. The House Judiciary Committee questioned 4 witnesses in this latest round regarding the Twitter files released a year ago. Lawmakers are looking to lay out the federal government's reported involvement in suppressing speech on social media. Witnesses included Twitter files journalists Michael Shellenberger and Matt Taibbi, along with Canadian journalists Rupa Subramanya and former Homeland Security Advisor Vice President Mike Pence, Olivia Troy. Republicans stuck to their theme that the federal government was weaponized to stop the spread of information critical of the government on social media, while Democrats defended social media platforms' right to remove posts that violate community guidelines. During opening statements, Republican Chairman Jim Jordan accused the Biden administration of pressuring Twitter execs to suppress COVID-related content just days after Biden's inauguration.
But never forget, the third day of the Biden administration, I think it was maybe like 36 hours into it, Andy Slavitt sends an email from the White House to Twitter saying, take down this tweet ASAP. And of course, the irony was the tweet was from this administration's Democrat primary opponent, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And there was nothing in the tweet that was false.
Witnesses Taibbi and Shellenberger shared similar sentiment, expressing that every American should be concerned with government suppression of online speech.
This is not a partisan issue, that the test of your commitment to free speech is that you would like to see the speech that you really despise protected and that you would defend it.
I believe also that there's a less obvious but more important reason that people across the spectrum should care about this issue. And the former executive director of the ACLU, Ira Glasser, once explained to a group of students why he didn't support hate speech codes on campuses. The problem, he said, wasn't the speech. The problem was, quote, who gets to decide what's hateful? Who gets to decide what to ban? Because, quote, most of the time, it ain't you.
Republicans focused on reports that the Biden campaign, FBI, and eventually the White House colluded with social media execs to flag and remove content detrimental to President Biden, including the story from the New York Post about Hunter Biden's laptop.
Mr. Shellenberg, I want to ask you further that revolving door between the FBI and Twitter, and I also want to ask about those third-party, essentially government proxies. You referenced the Aspen Institute. Can you delve deeper into both of those questions, both of those topics?
Sure. It was the former general counsel of the FBI, Jim Baker, and the former deputy director of the FBI had both taken jobs at Twitter. There were so many FBI people at Twitter that they had their own internal group and their own little crib sheet to describe the difference between the terms that they use at the FBI versus at Twitter.
CIA had it as well.
Yeah, CIA as well had their own little internal group. And I'm sorry, what was the second question?
The third-party proxies.
Oh, yeah. Well, then the Aspen Institute, this was the weirdest thing. We discovered that Aspen Institute had created a workshop that it was attended by basically all of the major media, including as well as all the major social media platforms, to basically pre-bunk in advance the Hunter Biden laptop, even though it had not been, there was no evidence that it existed outside of the fact that the FBI knew that they had it because they got it in December 2019. So to have the Aspen Institute trying to persuade people not to cover the Hunter Biden laptop story in August and September of 2020 was quite chilling and disturbing to see.
Meanwhile, Democrats kept former president and current Republican frontrunner candidate Donald Trump front and center in their questioning.
This hearing suits political purposes. Republicans are holding the same hearing all over again for one simple reason. They want to distract from the actual threat of the weaponization of government on the American people. That is Donald Trump.
Democrats' questions were mostly directed at Republican witness Olivia Troy, who worked inside Trump's White House and has since spoken about her beliefs that Trump would be, quote, dangerous if elected to another term in office.
Your testimony, you cited violent language, increasingly incendiary language being invoked by President Trump about his so-called enemies. One of the words he used was vermin. What does that echo in your mind? Anyone else come to mind historically who referred to enemies of the state as vermin?
Yes, the horrible Hitler.
At times, there were sparks. A back and forth over Hunter Biden's laptop between Democratic Representative Dan Goldman of New York and Schellenberger got heated.
You've talked about the Hunter Biden laptop and how the FBI knew it existed. You are aware, of course, that the laptop, so to speak, that was published in the New York Post was actually a hard drive that the New York Post admitted here was not authenticated as real. It was not the laptop the FBI had. You're aware of that, right?
It was the same contents.
How do you know?
Because it's the same. I mean,
you would have to
CBS News
authenticate it to know it
it's
was the same
contents.
contents. You have no idea. You know hard drives can be manipulated.
Are you suggesting the New York Post participated in a conspiracy to construct the contents of the Hunter Biden laptop?
No, sir. The problem is that hard drives can be manipulated by Rudy Giuliani or Russia.
But what's the evidence that happened?
Well, there is actual evidence of it, but the point is it's not the same thing.
There's no evidence for it, so you're engaging in a conspiracy
I'm glad
theory.
you agree with me, Mr. Schellenberger, that transparency is the most important thing. And my last question for you is, do you think it would be transparent if Hunter Biden came to this Congress and testified in a public hearing, and more transparent than if he testified privately?
Literally, I've never thought about that. I have no idea.
You don't know?
Literally never thought about that.
Public testimony more transparent than private testimony?
Are you familiar with the First
Mr.
Amendment?
Chairman, I yield
says that
back.
the Congress shall take no action to abridge freedom of speech.
Yeah,
and that's what you just described.
Also during the hearing, Canadian witness Supermania said that the Canadian government kicked hundreds of Canadians out of their bank accounts when they protested the government over COVID lockdowns in 2021. She warned that it can happen and will happen in the United States. Chairman Jordan underscored her point, noting an incident regarding the investigation of the January 6 riots.
In the course of our investigation in this committee, on January 15, 2021, the FBI sent to Bank of America, tell us all of your customers' purchases in the Washington, D.C. area for a specific date. Customers transacting debit card or credit card Washington, D.C. purchases on specific dates in this town. Anyone, whether you're here for the rally, whether you're here for any kind of protest, if you're just in visiting your mom. And they further said, and they capitalize any historic purchase going back 6 months for any weapons or weapons-related vendor purchases. That is frightening stuff.
At this point, it's unknown if Congress will take any kind of action to deal with allegations of government weaponization and speech suppression. Republicans have vowed continued investigations, and Chairman Jordan announced the Weaponization Committee has subpoenaed Andrew Slavitt and Robert Flaherty for their alleged role in coercing social media to censor posts.